It is saying that we are now live on YouTube, Ian.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our multi-faith event. This is the first time we have attempted to do this on Zoom and on YouTube. And the first thing I want to do is thank Ian Reynolds for being an absolute superb IT star. I'm saying that confidently at the beginning of the meeting because I know absolutely nothing is going to go wrong. My name, my title is the Right Worshipful Mayor of Bath, and I am Councillor Amanda Rigby. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what my theme for the year is. And then I'm going to hand over to all our wonderful representatives from all the different faiths who are going to tell us how that impacts on the faith that they represent. All of this is going to be very, very ably chaired by the second person I'm going to give thanks to, who is Father Peter Edwards, who, as well as chairing today's meeting, is the Mayor's chaplain and has been a wonderful support to me through this rather bizarre time we are living. When I knew I was going to be Mayor, I'd not actually heard the word COVID. I don't think many of us had. And I chose as my theme, Combating Loneliness, the full title, Combating Loneliness, Bath, the Friendly City. And in one of those weird quirks of fate, it's probably even more apposite now than it was when I chose it in the first place. And I know some of you listened to the speech I gave when I accepted the honour of becoming the 793rd Mayor of Bath. So I'm not going to spend much time going through it. But what I wanted to say is that loneliness is actually a real scourge of our society. And until fairly recently, I think people have almost not wanted to admit to suffering from loneliness, as opposed to saying, I acknowledge that I experience loneliness, because sometimes words can be really quite powerful. And there's been an image in people's minds that loneliness means a little old person who's probably not terribly nice, so they don't have any friends. And that is a stereotype that I think we need to challenge. One of the stats that I quoted in my acceptance speech, which is still available on the mayoral YouTube channel, by the way, was that 40% of us at some stage in our lives will experience a sense of isolation, which in effect is what loneliness means. It means we're losing contact and we're losing community and we're losing that sense of belonging. And that can happen even when you're surrounded by people. You could be, a young mum with 3 young kids who everyone say they can't possibly be lonely. They've got people with them all the time. They can be lonely. And so what I wanted to do during my course of year of being Mayor, and it's working through people such as yourselves, is to get to a stage where no one is ashamed to say, I am feeling this way at the moment, and that everyone thinks it's in all our best interests if we do what we can to combat it wherever we see it. Whether that is as simple as picking up the phone and just, having a quick chat with someone, or even doing that thing. I know we've all got to be socially isolated, and I know we can only go out once a day for proper exercise. I went out this morning and I walked through Sydney Gardens and I had eye contact with a human being and I smiled at them, and then their dog came over to say hello. So generally that was a good experience for me. That was a good day. So that's why I think loneliness is something that is very, very important in our society. That's why it's probably even more important than I thought it was going to be. And that's why I am so looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. And thank you all for your time this afternoon. With all that being said, I am now going to hand over to Father Peter Edwards, who'll run the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and it's wonderful to see so many faces on the screen in front of me from the different faith groups represented in this wonderful city of Bath in which we live and work. As the Mayor has said, the theme of loneliness is one that is particularly apposite and appropriate for the times in which we live, these unprecedented times of COVID and pandemic and lockdown, there will be people known to each of us and probably people unknown to any of us who are feeling lonely at this time. Loneliness is, of course, a subject that all people of faith will care about, that all of our respective holy writings will speak about, will inform, that our different religious traditions and understandings will inspire us to combat in one way or another. So I'm very grateful to you, Madam Mayor, and to those who have put on this event for helping us to share some of those thoughts here today. Many of you will be used to the annual physical gatherings which usually take place in the Guildhall around this time of year. So we hope that this virtual get-together will work in the same way. So we're going to take each of us in turn to talk about, give our own perspectives, our own thoughts, our own about loneliness. So I'm going to invite Rui Farmer in the first instance to talk to us from her perspective about loneliness and how the Baha'i faith considers that and so on. So over to you, Rui.
Mute, Rui.
Mute. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to be giving the Baha'i perspective on loneliness. Thank you, Ian. Loneliness has always existed in the history of mankind. As a species, we thrive on relationships and social interaction, to the point that the absence of these connections often results in anxiety and depression. Mother Teresa spoke frequently about the most terrible poverty being that of loneliness and feeling unloved. And this silent epidemic of loneliness that is on the rise worldwide, especially in the West, reflects a breakdown in the social network of relationships. The fundamental teaching of all the world's religions is one of love. And during this pandemic, we've witnessed countless demonstrations of compassion, love, and humanity on a daily basis. Individuals, neighbours, and organisations have come together as never before to support those who are elderly, isolated, frightened, and vulnerable in our community. The Baha'i writings tell us, do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Although sadness and suffering are a natural part of the human experience, patience, trust, and reliance upon God can positively contribute to our spiritual growth, helping us emerge stronger and with a greater capacity and empathy for serving others. There is an African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. But in today's society, many families are separated by vast distances. People working long hours don't know their neighbours. Young parents struggling with feelings of isolation and overwhelm need to be held and supported. A safe, healthy, and loving environment is necessary for children to thrive, protected and nurtured by their entire community. We may live longer, but the elderly, when confronted with health and mobility issues, lower incomes and bereavement, become vulnerable and lonely. In a message dated December 2010, the international governing body of the Baha'i faith warned, it must be realized that the isolation and despair from which so many suffer are products of an environment ruled by an all-pervasive materialism. A culture of individualism that promotes competition and self-interest at the expense of others is responsible for the loneliness felt by so many. The lack of a willingness to share and cooperate gives rise to indifference toward the plight of the poor and the suffering. And the flood of refugees and migrants who miss the close, loving relationships of those they leave behind, has brought the phenomenon of social isolation to a new level. We are told there is indeed no greater power than the power of love. When the heart of man is aglow with the flame of love, he is ready to sacrifice all, even his life. Thus, when we truly have love for one another and a genuine concern for every member of the human race, we will not allow suffering and loneliness to continue. The Baha'i teachings strongly encourage social integration with people of all walks of life, of diverse religious, racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. Building communities by associating with those of different backgrounds not only fosters a spirit of service, but it also minimizes loneliness by rejecting the cult of individualism and self-centeredness. This expression of love for humanity, which includes respecting the rights of others and reaching out to the poor and lonely, can become part of the daily life of each person and the community itself, providing a sense of belonging and encouraging a sharing of life's challenges and opportunities as people gather and work together for a common purpose. In our own personal lives, small acts of kindness, such as phoning or calling on people to see how they're doing, sending a card or email, preparing a simple meal with care and love for someone in need, offering some assistance to a vulnerable person, or visiting a lonely neighbour, these all have a profound effect. Each of us can try in our own way to work toward a better world and be a home for the stranger, a balm to the suffering, and a tower of strength for the fugitive. Thank you.
Ruby, that was very thoughtful and thought-provoking, and we thank you very much for those insights that you brought to us, which I think speak to us all of about loneliness. And so, thank you very much. I'm going to ask. I'm not sure if the next one on our list is the Druid faith, and Cillian Carradine. I'm not sure if he is on the call. Richard, sorry, I didn't realize it was the same person. I do apologize. We look forward to your contribution, Richard. Over to you. Richard, you're on mute at the moment. If I could ask you to just so we can hear you.
Hello?
Lovely.
Yes.
Lovely.
No, thank
Great.
you. In this technological age, it is very easy to become absorbed in technology. It perhaps might be partly at the door of Darwin and his theory of the survival of the fittest. So many of us in this, as Roy was saying, this materialistic age, have perhaps lost a lot of our natural instinct for relating to one another and to the whole of the living world. A little song. Now I'll go down to some lonesome valley, where no man on earth there shall me find, where the pretty small birds do change their voices, and every moment blows blusterous wind. Lonesome valleys are hard to reach in lockdown, perhaps, as we are cut off from nature. But even in an urban flat, we can grow plants and encourage their growth by singing to them in a soothing way, but remembering that loud, aggressive music can kill them. As scientists discovered this back in the 70s, and you can find all about it in the famous book, The Secret Life of Plants, with which Prince Charles agrees. For communing with people and plants, there are allotments such as the Bath Organic Group by Victoria Park, where you can both enjoy raising the plants and also enjoying the fellowship of the other members of the group. Our bodies need movement to function properly, so gentle exercise is possible with a Zoom class perhaps at home in exercises like Qigong, which anyone can do of any age. Verbal language can be divisive, as we have learnt, especially recently with the fractious negotiations with the European community. But music is a far more universal language for bringing people together. So sing along to music rather than just passively listening, and perhaps dance as well. Ancient Hindu scripts say that the sound creates matter. And remember, as Chief Seattle said in 1850, all things are connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That was very insightful, and thank you. And it was very good to be reminded of our need for that relationship with the natural world and all that you brought to us. I'm going to ask Imam Mohammed now to give us his perspective on behalf of the Muslim faith and the Muslim community here in the city. You, Imam, to unmute yourself and to give us your thoughts over these next few minutes, please.
Thanks a lot, Father Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. Putting COVID-19 aside, loneliness is really a calamity of our modern day society that cannot go unnoticed. However, it also cannot be denied that COVID-19 had exacerbated its impact on people in multifaceted manner. Narrowing down the scope on Bath Islamic Society, our mosque has closed since March. Those who had plans to do pilgrimage in Mecca had to cancel their spiritual journeys, and gatherings generally were suspended. So, as with many other faith communities, we were left with no other choice but to adapt. Adaptation involves necessarily dealing with the question of loneliness. Consulting the Islamic tradition for guidance on what to do in situations of loneliness, I realized that the very term loneliness as such doesn't exist in the Islamic tradition, but rather the tradition tends to use solitude and seclusion. Most surprisingly, this solitude and seclusion are meant to be an opportunity, not a liability. As solitude carries the meaning of being not alone, but being with God alone. For in fact, a true believer is never on his own, even when he is alone. God is there all the time. We are told in the Quran, do you not see that God knows everything in the heavens and the earth? There is no secret conversation between three people where he is not the fourth. No between five people where God is not the sixth. No between less or more than that without him being with them. Wherever they may be, on the day of resurrection, he will show them what they have done. God truly has full knowledge of everything. Looking into Prophet Muhammad's life, we see that his first coming into contact with the divine started when he was in solitude. The tradition goes, the beginning of the divine inspiration to Prophet Muhammad was that the love of seclusion was made beloved to him. The love of seclusion was bestowed upon him. He used to go in seclusion in the cave of Hira, which is a cave in Mecca today, where he used to worship God alone continuously for many days before his desire to see his family. He used to take with him the journey food for the stay and then come back to his wife to take his food likewise again until suddenly the revelation descended upon him while he was in that cave. In the light of this, Islam calls for turning loneliness into solitude, a solitude that offers an opportunity for one to get closer to God, to reflect upon his relationship with him, to remember the very basic blessings that we normally take for granted, to even reflect upon what the concept of a community really means, and God's blessings upon us in granting us safe and healthy communities. Emphasizing such blessings that we take for granted, Prophet Muhammad said, there are two blessings that many people are deceived into losing, which are good health and free time. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. We're very privileged, I think, as people of faith, to have that opportunity to commune with God in that solitude. And thank you for reminding us of that, whatever our particular faith we belong to. What you say, what you bring to us is a lovely reminder of that presence of God wherever we are. I think what raises the question for me is how we help those who have no faith to combat that loneliness in that isolation that they feel, which is a challenge for us all as people of faith to bring that perspective to those without faith in our society. Thank you so much. We go on now to some insights from the Buddhist tradition from John Harvey. John, over to you.
Thanks. Have I unmuted? Am I mute or not?
No, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, excellent. Good. Okay. Am I on the screen? Good.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I don't know about you, but I'm quite a judging person. You know, this is right, that's wrong, it shouldn't be like this, etc. Well, Buddhist teachings have helped me onto a less judgmental track, or at least in my case, recognizing the judgment and being cautious about how I label experiences and where those labels might lead me. Loneliness is a label we attach to an experience. Such labels help us to organize our thoughts and to communicate with others. But avoidable difficulties can arise if we mistakenly think our feelings and emotions are who we actually are. If we think or say, I am lonely, or angry, depressed, stressed, or whatever, we're likely to believe that the experience of the feeling is who we are as a person. And when that happens, the experience is likely to stick around and affect our thinking and behavior. It can become what's commonly described as a vicious circle if we repeatedly interpret our experiences using the template of self-limiting beliefs. The Buddha's teaching focuses upon suffering and the ego-driven causes of suffering, but he did not blame or criticize. Suffering is real and painful. The experience of loneliness is real and painful. Buddhism describes a way out of such suffering through mindful reflection on the opinions we cling to, and a willingness to let them go. It's not easy to let go, even when it involves letting go of beliefs that contribute to our suffering, because sometimes when that very suffering seems intrinsic to our identity, in letting go, we might feel lost. There's a story about escaping from the prison of what we believe about ourselves. It's about a woman and a pencil, and it was translated from a Japanese Zen temple magazine. It's a Buddhist story, but its message applies to all faiths. It involves a Japanese master of calligraphy who had retired to the country, where he took an interest in the education of the local children. There was one boy whose parents had died and was being brought up by his grandmother. She was making great sacrifices raising the boy, but did not have many friends because she was always telling people how hard her life had become. When the teacher of calligraphy saw this boy's schoolwork, he told the grandmother, "He is talented. In time, he ought to go to the university in the capital. When that time comes, I will help you." When the boy was old enough, his grandmother visited the calligrapher. He told her that the university president was a friend. He offered to write a letter of introduction, which should mean the boy would be housed and educated at no cost to his grandmother. She said, "Well, I shall be very lonely, of course, but for the boy's sake, I agree." And so the calligrapher began to write the letter of introduction. Now, she really expected to see something, because this was a great master of calligraphy with rare brushes from China made of special hair. But instead of those brushes, he took an old blunt pencil stub and just made 2 quick cuts and scribbled something which she couldn't read. And he didn't sign it or seal it, which was the custom in Japan. She felt embarrassed, but didn't say anything. He carefully addressed the envelope to the president, but she thought, "I can't show this to the president. Anybody could have scribbled it." But anyway, she took it and went with her grandson to the city. And when the president read the letter of introduction, he said, "This is a masterpiece. He has used an old blunt pencil, but has such control that he has imitated brushstrokes. Who else could have done that? I'm going to keep this as a treasure. And of course, I'll take the boy." And so the boy stayed and she returned home. She wasn't quite as lonely as she'd expected. People started dropping in and bringing her little presents and stopped to talk. And one day, one of her new friends said to her, "Do you know why we like to visit you?" "I'll tell you. In the old days, you used to complain a lot, and it was a bit tiring. But now you hardly speak at all. When we leave here after being with you for a while, we find we've got a new courage and a new sort of inspiration for facing life. I'm only saying this because I want to ask you, what made the change in you?" And so the old lady told her the story about the pencil stub. She said, "You know, I kept thinking, why did he do it? He had all those wonderful brushes and ink, but he used a pencil stub. Why did he do that? And I kept on thinking, why the pencil stub? And one morning, I woke and realized I am the pencil stub. My mind was dull and blunt, but I reflected on the Buddha's teachings. And by trimming my ego, cutting away some selfishness, I found that even when I feel sad, I can choose how I behave. And now I'm able to respond to difficulties as a tree responds to the wind. I allow them. I allow them to pass through, and I feel a strength holding me and peace within." And so it occurs to me that we can use whatever faith inspires us to sharpen our inner pencil. Thank you.
John, thank you for that lovely illustration and that story, which will be good for us all to reflect on as we think about that inspiration and that attitude of mind and so on that story speaks of. I'm going to ask Balbir Kaur Nirwan now to talk about her perspectives from the Sikh faith to us. So if I could ask you to unmute yourself, Balbir, and over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure I've done very much on my piece at all, but I was finding it very difficult because so much to talk about loneliness, where to begin and where to stop. So I've just done a small piece just about to reflect on loneliness. So what can bring on loneliness? Through the loss of a partner, friend, sibling, child, old age, disability, divorce, all these things, ways of life that can bring loneliness to a person. But we all will find loneliness sometime in our life. At the present situation, due to the pandemic, everybody is finding loneliness. Even with young people, with children, they're finding it lonely because they're not able to go to work, communicate with their colleagues, having to sit on at home on a computer all day. And that loneliness, you can't actually, it's not the same as being away from your house. The stress of working at home, it's called. Managing homeschooling and work together is so stressful for the young people, especially with young children. And the children are suffering so much. I'm speaking from sort of experience here myself, not experiencing the fact that the children are with me, but through my children, my daughters. They've got children at home, they're trying to school them and do a full day's work. And it's very, very tiring. The children, it's the mental stress that's happening to the children. Sometimes they won't even talk to you on the phone, on the thing. We've been sitting looking at the computer screen all day. We don't want to talk to anybody. One of my grandchildren just cries, I don't want to talk. I miss my friends. I want to go out. Why is this COVID here? So they're all suffering, and it's not just children, not just home working at home as then homeschooling. It's those people who have lost their jobs, for the financial restraints, everything that the COVID has brought to them. So it's not just loneliness; it's also financial restraints as well. There are people, young people who normally had their parents looking after their children or helping them with pickups and that. They're feeling that missing that. The grandchildren want to hug their grandparents. It's all loneliness for them as well. And when you see them on the iPad, the smiles you see is really overwhelming. In Sikh scriptures, Guruji tells us that loneliness is an acceptable state of consciousness in Sikh Dharma. Sikh Dharma actually starts from the one word, ik, the one. There is not two, and one is always lonely. It is good to be lonely because lonely has three things in it: purity, infinity, and grace. When these ingredients get together and amalgamate with each other, one becomes lonely. One becomes one. Are there two gods? One God which produces ladies, another produces men, another God which produces animals and other products, produces trees. We say it with great pride. There is only one God. If there is one God, but one God, then there is one, but one you. There is but one me. I am. Then who do you want to be friends with? Friends with God. God is one too. He is lonely too. We are taught when we feel pain, lonely, distraught, lost, have grief, and can't find where to go and what to do, by meditating on the one God, for he who too is alone. Talk to him and you will find peace and salvation within you. Alone, let him constantly meditate on solitude, that which is solitary for this soul. For he who meditates in solitude attains supreme bliss. When you challenge the natural phenomena of life, you create duality and chaos, and the outcomes of duality and chaos is misery, pain, and disease, and nonsense. One needs to find oneself, find you, love yourself, to be happy within yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Balwi. That was very interesting, and very much appreciated that insight. Thank you. We now turn to Iris, who's going to give us her perspective from the Jewish tradition and faith. So over to you, Iris.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Father Peter, the speakers, and everyone at home who is listening. So yes, the theme is combating loneliness, and I'd like to reinforce what we've heard before about the difference between being lonely and being alone, because some people are quite happy just being with themselves, or like Richard mentioned, enjoying nature, and Muhammad also mentioned that some people, it is when they are by themselves that they feel the closest to God or whatever other power they consider important. Now, the mayor's theme, combating loneliness, Bath the Friendly City, was the original name, even before we knew about COVID. I would like to tweak it a little and say it's Bath and Beyond, and it's friendly people, especially nowadays when we are doing it all online, and people who might be geographically much further away from Bath can still join us and either watch right now or perhaps watch the recording later on. Now, if you would like to go to the next slide. So from the Jewish perspective, the first verse of Psalm 133 is translated below in 3 slightly different ways. So we can say, how good and how pleasant it is when brothers dwell together. So it's this appreciation of how nice it is when people are together. So they're not alone, they're together. Also, how good and how pleasant it is that brothers dwell together, because brothers can fight and be separate, but it is much nicer and pleasant if they are together. And the third interpretation or translation is how good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to sit together. So here I'd like to underline or highlight the fact that when we say brothers, we don't mean only in the masculine, it can be brothers and sisters. We don't literally mean brothers and sisters, we just mean people. How nice it is to see people when they are together. So this is the first verse of Psalm 133. So that's kind of like a Jewish perspective of not being lonely, but being together. And I will come back to that. Now again, about the theme of combating loneliness, and this kind of like has resonated through the previous speakers. The topic has acquired a much stronger resonance over the past year. Now, in Bath, as in many other cities and villages, people set up telephone trees, WhatsApp groups, and all sorts of networks in order to ensure that family, friends, neighbors, and strangers got the immediate help of food and medications that they needed. So we reached out, and we didn't reach out only within our own faith or our own culture or our own neighborhood. We reached out as far as we could. And sometimes people might feel that they've not done enough, but actually every little gesture that we do can make a huge difference for other people, even if we don't realize it. So yeah, there were faith community initiatives, but also clubs, societies, parish councils, and simply individuals that got together in order to offer help within their neighborhoods. Then attention turned to mental and spiritual health. And therefore, as it was mentioned a little earlier, Zoom groups and similar were established for people to get together while socially distanced. So before the pandemic, it was very hard for me personally to just pick up the phone and talk to someone. If I saw them, I could converse quite easily. But to take this first step to call someone was very difficult. I think in the last few months, I've probably made more phone calls than ever in my life. But through that, I also made new friendships or strengthened friendship with those that before were just acquaintances. Also, perhaps we just take walk in the neighborhood and we keep seeing the same faces of people that we didn't know before, but now they're becoming familiar faces. And so we tend to say hello and sometimes exchange a couple of words, how it's sunny or snowy or the snow drops are blooming or whatever it is, but we are reaching out to people and that gives them something and gives us something in return. So the next slide is again Psalm 133, the first verse. In Hebrew, it sounds like this. It says, Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. And again in English, behold, how good and how pleasing it is for brothers or for people to sit together in unity. So I thought that it would be nice to just show, this is actually, this verse is a very well-known song in Hebrew. And although we are each social distancing and in our own homes, in a moment, hopefully it will work out and you can see a video where despite of the distance and the social separation, we came together, a few of us, to record the music and I hope that you will enjoy it. So if Ian is able to share the video now, we will hear the song. There's no sound. I cannot hear anything. I can only see the images.
I'm sorry, Ian, we don't seem to have any sound on the video at the moment.
Okay.
Ian,
Yes,
you're still set to mute, so it may be that you have to unmute.
You could well be right. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry, the video just crashed on me. I just had to restart it. Bear with me. Okay, I'm just going to try this again.
No, we still cannot hear it. So anyway, I'll just talk you through it and give an example with my own singing, which is not the best of voices. Sorry about that. So the idea was that we are separate but still together and can join in singing. As you saw there were a few people. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't plan on singing and I don't have the best voice for singing, but I'll just give you a short demonstration and then pass it on. So it's Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. I'll stop there. But so it's just about how good it is for all of us to be together, even if it is virtually. So thank you very much.
Iris, thank you. And we appreciate your singing as well. It's an unexpected pleasure for us all. Thank you. And last but not least, I'm going to ask Anna to speak to us from the Christian perspective about combating loneliness. So if I could ask you, Anna, to speak to us.
Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you find yourselves this afternoon. And we've heard from the speakers this afternoon various parts of loneliness, so hopefully I can add a little bit to that. Loneliness is a really individual experience and can hit us at any age. Some people can feel lonely in a crowd, and others can feel really, really content on their own. The form and extent of loneliness is really different too. And often if there's something going on that's challenging in our lives, we can feel even more lonely with it. But as we've heard, being alone doesn't necessarily mean that we're lonely. I crazily walk my dog very early in the morning, and I'm the only person pretty much out at that time in the morning. But the very last thing I feel is lonely. But thinking of all of this brings to mind the story of the Apostle of Paul. While he was alone in prison, he constantly felt the presence of God. He knew the pain of loneliness. And after years of faithful service, he found himself in a cold, dank, dark prison. And in his last letter to Timothy, we see a glimpse of the conditions and how he felt. Although he wasn't always on his own, he felt lonely. He felt deserted. He felt loneliness on different levels and at different times. And I think for many of us, loneliness is a bit of a spectrum. We can feel very uplifted when we hear from somebody. We can feel very isolated when it's been a little bit of time between hearing or seeing people, even if it is outside of your window. We feel restricted. We feel limited to what the things that we might have previously been able to do. Perhaps travel, perhaps even just walk down the end of the garden. But the Lord makes provision within our loneliness. The assurance of Christ's presence. I am with you always, even to the end of the age, is a wonderful reminder for me that we have that presence. But part of being lonely is about us as individual people. Being able to share the load of our situation with others can significantly improve our experience of loneliness. For as long as I can remember, I've attended, organised, probably gate crashed some wonderful get-togethers and gatherings with Christian fellows. We are a people who need people. We are people that love to be part of other people's lives. Our Christian calling reminds us of the importance of relationships with others, the role of sharing, but also for being there for those around us. This year has truly highlighted the presence of loneliness in our communities, perhaps in places and people that we were not previously aware of. The disconnection from not just those we love, but those who form part of our day-to-day lives. Neighbours, community workers, shop workers, those that just are in our communities. People that we perhaps not met before Clap the Carers. Those people that we gathered with on the street. But loneliness didn't start with lockdown, but it has certainly finally given it the attention that it needs. For many, it is a continuation of what is their normal life. For others, their experience has intensified. As Christians, we're not only called to share the love of God with fellow Christians, which is often more comfortable, but to reach out to all of those in need, to those who feel disconnected, isolated for all sorts of reasons, to reach out with all our God-given senses, with words of kindness. We're long since writing less cards and letters, but I have a wonderful neighbour that writes a card to me every day, and I back to her. Those beautiful words of kindness. I know we're socially distancing, but gentle touch when we're allowed once more, whether it's a fist pump or a handhold or just a gesture of care. Sharing the beauty of what we see in God's creation around us, talking about creation with people that are around us. The wonders of the rain, we're a great one for talking about the weather in this country, but engaging people in the world around us. But I guess for me, one of the most important things of our senses is listening and really hearing what other people need and want to say. So I pray that we have learned a lot about loneliness in this last year, and that we don't put it back on a shelf. We work hard to seek ways of combating it. And I'd like to leave this poem with you, written by Anne Peterson. Sometimes I really struggle, Lord, when I'm feeling low. It feels as if the world has moved on as people come and go. And yet if I can just be still, I realise I'm wrong. For I've never been left alone. You've been here all along. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that perspective as well. I think that probably comes to the end of our formal presentation. So in a moment, I'm going to ask us all to, I'm going to lead us in a prayer for us all to join in as we wish. But I just, before I do that, I'd just like to say thank you to you all. I've personally found it a very interesting, very valuable exercise to hear all that you've all brought to this gathering today. And I hope that we can all, as we go from this call, find ways that we can celebrate the ways in which solitude reminds us of God's presence on the one hand, but also we're inspired to do something about loneliness that we perceive in other people, and the way that many of you have spoken about serving the vulnerable in our society. So perhaps we could just have a moment of silence as we reflect on what we have heard today, and then I will say the final prayer to which we can bring our assent. So I'm going to read the words of our final prayer. Ian very kindly put it on the screen, so perhaps you'd all like to join in these words. Let there continue to be respect for the earth, peace for its
people, love
in
our lives, delight
in the good, forgiveness for past
wrongs,
and hope
in
all
our hearts.
I'm going to hand back now to Madam Mayor, who will say some closing words of thanks and reflection as we bring this gathering towards an end. Over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very, very much, Father Peter, and thank all of you so much. Normally at this stage, I'd be saying, I hope you can all come and join us for some light refreshment and a bit of a chat. Oh, I see some of us already are. Cheers. But we can't do that together. I not only need to thank you all, I need to say that I find all these conversations really, really inspiring, because although everyone is coming from a slightly separate faith or viewpoint, what I find interesting is so much commonality, but then there's also so many quite interesting differences. So some of the things that I sort of picked out today would be and these are things that have touched me deeply, and I feel in my heart that any demonstration of love or kindness is a way of combating loneliness. And someone once said to me a while back that you might not have changed the world today, but you changed the world for someone. And that kind of is enough in some ways. Absolutely, the power of music and nature came through very strongly. And I probably will try and do a bit of singing and dancing in my kitchen. But for the sake of everybody else, I'll probably do it on my own because I've not got.
Can't you put that on your YouTube channel, please?
Father Peter, no, but thank you for the suggestion. I found it quite interesting how that there is this element where we think of loneliness as absolutely a bad thing, but switching it on its head, there is a bit of power sometimes in solitude and reflection. And maybe like a lot of things in life, it's all about balance. An excess of being on your own could lead to too much loneliness, or an excess of isolation leads to loneliness. But you actually need the proper amount in order to be able to do your own self-reflection. And if you are in a faith, to talk to the God during that time. So I found that, an interesting way of looking at it. It's not just about combating it. And what came through really clean, I think practically everybody's, the huge difference between being lonely and being alone. And so to reach out and I think someone said to sort of listen and hear what people really need, irrespective of whether or not that's the words that are coming out of their mouths. We've all had those conversations, haven't we, where we've spoken to someone and said, how are you feeling? They said, oh, I'm fine. And you kind of know that's not true. You kind of know that that's not this, but that's what they choose to present at the time. So let's hope that we can all get to a stage where our individual experiences of loneliness, we can reach out for the help that we need when we want to reach out for it. Someone spoke about, I think it was you, Anna, about, and we can't do it obviously at the moment, but the power of touch. Because I think it is, I have not touched or hugged or done anything to another human being for nearly a year. And I am not one of the world's most tactile people, but I need to warn all my friends, once I'm allowed to do it, I'm hugging them and I'm not letting go for a very, very, very long time. So if you see me coming, run the other way once we can do this, because we've all learned something about ourselves. And we've learned something about ourselves and our communities, which people have said have stepped up unbelievably well. We can't afford to lose that. This pandemic has been dreadful, but if there are some things we can take and make it our better, I hate the phrase new normal, but I can't think of a better one right now. If we can make it better in the future, then at least we've taken some good from it. And actually this last hour, I think, has helped as well. I love the fact that we can all come together like this and share our thoughts and feelings, even if we can't actually do the break bread together. There's another couple of people as well I need to thank as well, and that's Anthony and Elizabeth, who not only work so hard in the Mayor's office. I was doing a list once of all the things we've had to do this year for the first time that we've never done before, because circumstances have been that's what we've had to do. And without Anthony and Elizabeth in the office, none of it would have happened. So can I thank you all for your time, for your contributions? And yes, let's give everybody a little round of applause. And we will make this recording available and you can share it when you will. Please all enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you.